Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a mental disorder. It comes from trauma. Trauma can come from sexual assault, warfare, car crashes, or child abuse. It can also come from domestic violence. These are threats to a person's life. Symptoms may include disturbing thoughts, feelings, or dreams about the events. They may cause mental or physical distress. People may also try to avoid things that remind them of the events. Symptoms can also include changes in thinking and feeling. There's also an increase in the fight or flight response. These symptoms last for more than a month after the event. Young children are less likely to show distress. Instead, they may express their memories through play. A person with PTSD is at a higher risk of suicide and intentional self-harm. Most people who experience traumatic events do not develop PTSD. They are more likely to develop PTSD. This compares to those who have trauma not based on assault. This includes accidents and natural disasters. They may have experienced trauma for a long time. This trauma could be from slavery, concentration camps, or chronic domestic abuse. It may give them complex post-traumatic stress disorder, C-PTSD. C-PTSD is like PTSD, but it has a clear effect on how a person regulates their emotions and their core identity. Counseling may prevent problems, but it only helps those with early symptoms. It does not help all trauma-exposed people, even if they have symptoms. The main treatments for people with PTSD are counseling, psychotherapy, and medication. SSRIs and SNRIs are the main drugs for PTSD. They help about half of the people. Benefits from medication are less than those seen with counseling. We do not know if using both medications and counseling is better than using each one alone. Most medications lack evidence to support their use. This is true for all except some SSRIs or SNRIs. In the case of benzodiazepines, they may make outcomes worse. In the United States, about 3.5% of adults have PTSD in a given year, and 9% of people develop it at some point in their life. In much of the world, rates are between 0.5% and 1% during a year. Higher rates may occur in regions of armed conflict. It is more common in women than men. Experts have documented symptoms of trauma-related mental disorders. They have done so since at least the time of the ancient Greeks. Some argue that a few cases of post-traumatic illness existed in the 17th and 18th centuries. An example is Samuel Pepys's diary. He described intrusive and distressing symptoms after the 1666 Fire of London. During the World Wars, the conditions had many names. These included shell shock, war nerves, neurasthenia, and combat neurosis. The term post-traumatic stress disorder came into use in the 1970s. This was largely due to the diagnoses of U.S. military veterans of the Vietnam War. The association recognized it officially in 1980. This was in the third edition of the Manual on Mental Disorders. DSM-3 called it. About 78% of people exposed to combat do not get PTSD. In about 25% of soldiers who get PTSD, it appears late. Refugees are also at increased risk for PTSD. This is due to their exposure to war, hardships, and trauma. The rates of PTSD in refugees range from 4% to 86%. This is from measuring trauma and health status in refugees. A critical review by Michael Holifield, Maryland. Teddy D. Warner, PhD, Nityamo Lian, DOM, NM. War stresses everyone, but it affects displaced persons more than others. Challenges related to the well-being of refugees are complex. Each one has its nuances. Refugees have lower well-being. They also have high rates of mental distress. This is due to past and ongoing trauma. These groups are facing severe impacts. Their needs often go unmet. The groups are women, older people, and unaccompanied minors. Trauma and depression hurt refugee education. The Israel-Palestinian conflict has gone on for a long time. It has caused a lot of social and psychological suffering to those involved. Many in the Israeli Defense Forces have spoken about their mental well-being. They have come forth after committing acts of violence against the defenseless. The situation in Palestine has mostly impacted young men and children. This is a consequence of the long-standing conflict.